Okay, alright. Honestly, this guy turns his bandsaw on as soon as I want to record every single time. He just knows. He just knows this is the time. Okay, let's do this. The video that all 5 of you have been waiting for, Pool C preview. So we finally get around to previewing Pool C of the Rugby World Cup and the group that is likely to provide the most entertainment in the chase for quarter-final places. Now, England crashed out of their own tournament back in 2015, a point I'm sure every rugby-playing nation likes being reminded of, bar one, when they were drawn in the group of death against Wales and Australia. And once again, they find themselves in the only group with 3 Tier 1 nations in it, France and Argentina joining them this time. But it's hard to call this one a pool of death like we did last time, given that there were 2 world champions and a rampant Wales in that one. But the possibility of one of these 3 this time not being in the quarterfinals would be unprecedented. 3 times finalist France have never failed to make the quarters. Argentina, who came 4th in England 4 years ago, have made the quarters in the last 3 tournaments. And while England were the team to crash out last time, they're odds-on favourites to top the group this time. Now they go into the competition in 3rd place in the world rankings. And 2019 has been an improvement on 2018 for them, but 2 losses to Wales will still hurt. And questions over their mental approach perhaps remain after a poor start to Japan in the autumn internationals and complete capitulation to Scotland in this year's Six Nations. But when they play, they play. Their first demolition against Ireland in the Six Nations this year had everybody saying it was England's year. Since then they've put in some great performances at Twickenham against Ireland and Wales, and they seem to be finding the right gear as they head into the tournament. As far as predictions go then, our algorithm is giving them wins quite predictably against Tonga and USA. But their first big fixture comes against Argentina in game week 3, and the final score in that one is expected to be 35 points to 16 to England. In all likelihood, that one will tee up a group decider against France in the final game week of the group stage, and that one's projected as a 36 point to 21 win for the English. Now, as top fantasy picks go for England, they had some great performances through the Six Nations and through the warm-up fixtures, but there are a few key players who stand out. Now, before I throw my picks up on screen, just to clarify that all the information that's held in these player cards is part of our silver and gold upgrade bundles. We've built algorithms into the background that collect and collate all of the information on players and give you an indication of how valuable they're going to be to your squad. Now, my first pick for England is hooker Jamie George. He posted some great scores through the Six Nations, not least a 40-point return when England lost in Cardiff. He also maintained a points per 80 of 33.72 through the Premiership season, which is one of the highest in his position. He's an exemplary performer with deft hands and great vision, and should certainly be one of the first picks in your squad. Next up is Jamie George's Saracens teammate Maro Itoje, who arrives at the World Cup off the back of a 43-point performance against Ireland and a 34-point haul against Wales in the warm-ups. Had he not suffered a knee ligament injury in England's first Six Nations fixture against Ireland, he would have taken his autumn international form into the competition and posted some great scores. And given that our in-house AI Henry has England down as going well through the tournament, you can check that out in another video, we should expect a great return from one of England's finest. My next pick for England then is their speedster Johnny May, who topped the try-scoring charts through the Six Nations, with 3 of those coming against none other than Group C opponents, France. 43 points in the opener against Ireland, 44 against France, and another 35 against Scotland also helped propel him to the top of the points table too. And if England are going to go far in this tournament, they'll need him firing on all cylinders, and that's a great benefit to fantasy coaches. Finally, my wildcard for England is none other than Joe Thuxaniga. He put in a huge performance against Australia in the autumn, as well as Italy in the Six Nations and Ireland in the warm-ups. Chances are he'll find himself on the wing for Tonga and USA and should be set to pick up some excellent fantasy points. Now, England have their bye in game week 4, so make sure you pick up their players early as we head into the tournament. Now, like England, France also had an up-and-down 2018, but it's that decidedly French inconsistency that adds so much intrigue to this group. They did beat Argentina in the autumn, but they followed that up with a defeat against Fiji, and then they could only muster wins against Scotland and Italy in the Six Nations. But you know what? This is France. This is the country that has been a thorn in the side of many a World Cup hopeful. They've made it to 3 Rugby World Cup finals over the years, and as much as they can disappoint, they can also bring rugby to life. Who can forget their incredible comeback against New Zealand in 1999? Now, as far as predictions go, they face their first major test against Argentina in the first game week. Win and you're almost guaranteed to be in the quarters, perhaps even as the group winner. Lose and you have the unenviable task of having to beat England to make it to the quarterfinals. As it is, our prediction algorithm has this one as a win for the French. From there, they shouldn't have too many problems against Tonga and the USA, but hey, this is France. And then their final pool game pits them against England, and as I said, there's a win for the English in that one. And defeat in that game will leave them as runners-up in the group, and will pit them against probably Wales in the quarterfinal, who will win their important game against Australia. Now, in terms of players for France, despite their up and down form, there are a few who stand out as excellent choices in your squad, and the first one of those is Antoine Dupont. He smashed his way through the Six Nations, taking until the last fixture to drop below 30 points in a game, and he continued the same level of high performance through the warm-up fixtures. Explosive, skillful and diligent, he's an exciting choice for your fantasy team. Next up is an enigmatic stalwart that has been such an integral part of the French machine for the last 11 years. Louis Picamol is a physical and uncompromising number 8 who is great on the floor and going forward with the ball in hand. If France are to announce themselves as genuine contenders to push on through the competition, they will need him at the fore, and if that becomes the case, expect some high scores from him. Next up is another young player who has established himself in the French back three, Damien Penaud. And while fantasy scores for the French were generally muted through the Six Nations, he registered some good returns against England and Italy, 31 and 43 points respectively. From there, a 30 and then 42 point haul against the Scots has brought him to the top of the wing choices for fantasy coaches as the World Cup looms. Finally, my wild card is another one of the young prospects making his mark in the blue, Demba Bamba. His raw potential is second to very few. He's a hard worker, a great carrier. Don't forget there are good points available for running props. His discipline is perhaps a small point of concern, but he should be able to make a big impact at the World Cup. Now, France have their bye in game week 2 of the competition, so best to hold off at the beginning and pull them into your squad for the last few rounds of the group stage. Now, Argentina go into the competition 11th place in the world rankings, and their 2019 form was a darn sight poorer than their 2018. Back in 2018, they did come last in the Rugby Championship by virtue of Australia's losing bonus point, but they registered wins against South Africa and Australia. Through the back end of the year in their Northern Hemisphere tour, they lost to Ireland, Scotland, and perhaps most importantly, France, and then this year they failed to pick up a win in the Rugby Championship. They also lost their final warm-up game against South Africa while the second Bledisloe was being played. And for the World Cup, the prediction is equally as bleak. Losses to France and England, as I've said, will leave them in third place in the group, and they'll leave the tournament at this stage. But with that said, they do have some fantastic players who earn some great points week in, week out for the Jaguares and Super Rugby, and the first one of those is Guido Petit. Now, he finished the Super Rugby season as the top scoring lock on the game. A nice balance between attacking and defensive points earned kept his totals high from game to game, and when on form he regularly smashes out 40 plus fantasy points. Indeed, against the Sunwolves this year he hit 75 points, and last year against the Stormers he made 107. Imagine captaining that. Incidentally, that's still only the second highest score on the game. The highest belongs to Ellis Genge, who managed 115 points against Northampton in April 2018. Next up then is one of Argentina's more illustrious players, who in 2018 overtook Felipe Contepomi to top the all-time point scoring record for the Pumas. Nicolas Sanchez is a player overflowing with natural ability, and as well as being great with the boot, runs well with the ball in hand. Indeed, he finished the 2015 iteration as the top point scorer, and with that in mind, he makes a great choice for the 10 berth and kicker in your team. My third pick then for Argentina has to be Emiliano Buffelli. He missed out on the 2015 World Cup and then found his wait for his international debut hampered by injury. Since his first appearance in 2017 though, he's gone from strength to strength, and the 24-year-old fullback is set to earn some great points with the ball in hand. Finally, my wildcard for Argentina goes to 22-year-old Bautista Del Gui, who has posted some superb scores through the 2018 Super Rugby season with Jaguares, and began in the same vein this season before an ankle injury in March took him out of contention. He was a standout performer for the Pumas at the 2016 Under-20 World Championship, where they finished in third place. He's a mazy runner and a great finisher, and should the ball find its way to his hands, he should rack up some great fantasy scores through the competition. Now, Argentina have their bye in the final game week of the group stage, so best to pick up their players early as we head into the tournament. Now, next up is Tonga, and aside from the 1991 iteration of the tournament, they have otherwise been synonymous. But unfortunately for them, it's rather tied to the group stage of the competition. In 2015, they were beaten by Georgia, but roll back to the 2011 iteration of the tournament and they beat none other than Pool C opponents France, 19 points to 14. If the men in red can do the same again this year, as well as digging out a victory against Argentina, they could find themselves in the quarterfinals. And what a story that would be. That said, their preparation for this tournament included a warm-up game against New Zealand, in which they succumbed 92 points to 7. Fortunately, they were playing next try wins. Before that though, a solitary win against Canada sits amongst defeats to Fiji, Samoa, Japan and Georgia. And as far as predictions go, our algorithm has them down as little better. Indeed, it's projecting a loss against the USA in that final group game, which will leave them rooted to the bottom of the group table. Now, as far as player picks for Tonga go, it's hard to kick this off with anyone other than Siale Piatau. Older brother to Charles, they both play at Bristol Bears in the Premiership, where Siale has been putting in some great fantasy performances. This will be his third World Cup, having made the cut in 2011. Next up is another player who's been playing his trade in the Premiership over the last year, though this season didn't perhaps go as well as hoped from a team point of view. Although Newcastle were relegated, Sonatane Takalua was one of the competition's shining lights. A good game manager and a consummate kicker, he's a great addition to your squad through the group stages. The Premiership theme continues with my next pick as well, with Sione Kalamafoni coming under the spotlight. Now 31, the Leicester Tiger number 8 was man of the match in the aforementioned game against the French in 2011, and Tonga will be hoping for more of the same in this iteration. And looking at his form over the course of the season, with an otherwise lacklustre Leicester, one should expect his scores to sit around the 30-point mark. Finally, my wildcard for Tonga is a player who plays for Silverstorm El Salvador in Spain, James Faiva. The 25-year-old has only recently linked up with the squad, but Totai Kefu has been sufficiently impressed to give Faiva the job of leading the Islanders' attack. He had a bench role in that loss to New Zealand, but performed well against Fiji and Canada in the warm-up, so keep an eye on him as a good option when Tonga go up against the US. Now Tonga have their bye in game week 3 of the competition, so it might be best leaving their players until they head into that USA game at the end of the group stage. And so finally we come to the USA, who like Tonga are synonymous with the group stage of the competition. Now 2019 hasn't been too bad for them. Wins against Chile, Brazil, Canada and Samoa have been balanced out by defeats against Uruguay, Japan and an Argentine 15. But the thing that they perhaps have heading into this iteration that they haven't had before is bags of confidence. With that in mind though, they're still set for a tough tournament. Expect losses to the big three before they go up against Tonga in the final game week for their bottom of the table decider. As I said, our algorithm has the USA down as the winners in that one, which will leave them in 4th place in the group. In terms of player picks then, it's hard to look beyond anybody but Joe Taufese as the USA's top pick. He made his debut at the 2015 World Cup and hasn't looked back since, scoring tries for fun. Strong hooker, it's that try-scoring ability that pushes him to the top of the picks for the US. Next up then is AJ McGinty, who, born in Ireland, plays his rugby with Sale Sharks in the Premiership. His performances for the Manchester men have been exemplary, regularly pushing through the 40 and sometimes 50-point mark. So next up is captain Blaine Scully, who's a naturally talented sportsman. The 31-year-old made his debut shortly before the 2011 tournament and has been ever present since. Indeed, his experience is going to be hugely beneficial for the men in white. And finally, my wildcard for the USA is none other than Bedford Blues' Will Hooley. He's been starting at 15 through the warm-up games, always a great position to score points from, and if he can get the ball in hand and press forward, you can expect some good fantasy scores. Now the USA have their bye in the first game week of the competition, so perhaps hold off on their players and then bring them in a little bit later on, perhaps for that Tonga game at the end of the group stage. So there we go, Pool C, all done and dusted. I'm obviously looking forward to it as an Englishman, but I think there's going to be some great matchups in this group and it's going to be very, very exciting. There's so many subtleties being played out underneath the surface. So as ever, hit that like and subscribe button, follow us on your favourite social media channel and look out for the next episode where I 100% promise I will be covering Pool D of the Rugby World Cup.